thank you for coming today. Good morning and welcome to the Amera Center and our 2024 Ideas Summit hosted by the ANC. Today is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, which commemorates the Sharpeville Massacre of the 21st of March in 1960, in which peaceful demonstrators against apartheid in South Africa were killed. This tragic event was a turning point in the nation's fight for equality and democracy. The battle to end racial discrimination is ongoing to this day. Today, we're doing our small part to spread awareness of anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. This year, we're focusing on diversity and inclusion in workplaces in Newfoundland and Labrador. My name is Rachel Gilbert, and I am newly hired on as the Black Community Engagement Lead with the ANC. If you came to our summit last year, Barb Walsh was here, so I got some big shoes to fill. My role is to support, promote, and uplift the members of our Black community, and I am honored to host today's summit, and I thank you all for joining us in person and online. I'd like to start us off with a land acknowledgement. With deep respect and gratitude, we acknowledge that we are gathered in the traditional Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit territories. As newcomers to and residents of Uktahunguk, known as Newfoundland and Labrador, we commit to collective healing, reconciliation, and land honoring with and for the Indigenous peoples of this land. Now, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Lorinda White and the St. John's Mi'kmaq Women's Circle, who will guide us through a smudging ceremony before we get into it here today. I'm going to read about them. The St. John's Mi'kmaq Women's Circle is open to all women, trans women, and self-identifying women in the St. John's and surrounding area who meet to share and learn in the Mi'kmaq culture. The group shares in talking circles, smudging, crafts, drumming, language, and feasting. The mission and goal of the St. John's Mi'kmaq Women's Circle is the rejuvenation of their cultural and spiritual heritage. The objectives of the St. John's Mi'kmaq Women's Circle include to enhance and respectfully learn the Mi'kmaq culture, to promote community awareness of the Mi'kmaq culture, to liaise with other provincial Mi'kmaq organizations with common goals, to develop programs and activities for Mi'kmaq women, to be the voice for Mi'kmaq women, to address issues of Mi'kmaq women, and to serve as a Mi'kmaq resource in St. John's and the surrounding area. So thank you so much for joining us here today. Thank you, folks, and thank you for the smudging ceremony. It was lovely. We get some fresh air, hey? Now, we'll get back to it. I do have a couple of house rules. So feel free to get up and use the washroom, get something to eat or drink at any time. We have lunch. We got coffee and tea in the back. We ask that you keep your phones on silent. Feel free to go in and out of the room as needed to take calls. If you have any questions or comments throughout the day, you can contact myself. You can pull me aside. There's also a couple other members of the diversity team around. But you can also email us at diversity@ancnl.ca throughout the day with any questions or comments that you have. I'd also like to welcome and thank our ASL interpreters, Sheila Keats and Heather Crane. And I'd like to thank our French interpreters for being here as well, Susan Crocker and Claire Wilkshire. If anybody needs French interpretation, please see myself or Jamie Ryan, and I'm going to introduce the diversity team afterwards, so you know who they are. And lastly, I'd like to thank all of our sponsors, McInnes Cooper, Pennacon, the Anna Templeton Center, Ian College, Hospitality NL, and RBC. And I'd also like to thank the Amera Center and staff for having and supporting us here today. Jamie Ryan, want to put your hand up for me? Woo! There's Jamie. So if you have any questions or need any support throughout the day, Jamie's our diversity coordinator. Then we have Raylene Flynn. Hi, Raylene. And we have David Campbell, also on the diversity team. And again, my name is Rachel Gilbert. So just pull one of us aside and we'll help you as best as we can. Also, The Gardner Center has graciously donated 2 program certificates valued at over $1,000 each. Their programs can be attended virtually or in person. Whether you interact with us, whenever you interact with us, by sending us a question or a comment to our diversity@ancnl.ca Gmail, your name is entered in to win one of those program certificates. So throughout the day, any questions or comments, shoot us an email and your name will get entered in for that. As well, at the end of the day today, I'm going to do a quick talk about doing a feedback survey, and you'll see that there are QR codes on your table. So we'll set aside some time for that at the end of the day. And when you complete this survey, your name also gets entered in to win one of those program certificates as well. Now, without further ado, we'll get the ball rolling, and I would like to introduce Libby Angel, who is the ANC's Director of HR. Libby has over 30 years of experience in the HR world, and she focuses on organizational equity, diversity, and inclusion. She's responsible for the EDI in our org, and she has just worked to set up the EDI committee. So I'd like to invite Libby.
So I just want to welcome everyone to the ANC's Diversity Summit. It is with great pleasure that we gather here today to honor and embrace diversity in all of its forms. For more than 40 years, the Association for New Canadians has been dedicated to supporting and empowering newcomers to become independent and actively engaged, living and working in Newfoundland and Labrador. We envision a province where newcomers feel welcomed and easily integrate into the social and economic fabric, where their contributions are recognized by the greater population, and where they feel comfortable settling and making Newfoundland and Labrador their new home. This gathering today is a testament to our collective commitment to this vision, to acknowledge where we are in this journey and the challenges that remain as we continue to move forward. Our summit provides a forum to showcase the positive contributions and impact that newcomers bring to our communities. Today, we'll celebrate the past year's achievements and facilitate a larger conversation for consideration within the context of diversity and inclusion strategies in your own workplaces, communities, and beyond. The theme for this year's summit is Workplace Diversity and Inclusion, and it aims to explore how organizations can move beyond hiring as a diverse workforce to creating a space where every employee is inspired to reach their full potential. We feel it's important to not only champion diversity as an organization in our province, but also to provide you with insights, best practices, and resources to assist newcomers in feeling included, respected, and productive within their workplaces and communities. Thank you for joining us today, and please enjoy the full day. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Libby. All right. Next up, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Tony Fang. I'm going to tell you about him real quick. Hang on, Tony. Professor Tony Fang is the Stephen Jaroslawski Chair in Economic and Cultural Transformation at Memorial University. He holds the J. Robert Baster Faculty Fellowship at Rutgers University and an adjunct professorship with the University of Toronto and Toronto Metropolitan University. Previously, he served on a World Bank Expert Advisory Committee on Migration and Development from 2014 to 2019. As the president of the Chinese Economic Society from 2012 to 2013, and as the domain leader at CERIS, Ontario Metropolis Centre, from 2009 to 2012. He's been a visiting professor at Harvard University at NBER, the Wharton School of Business, and the Chinese University of Hong Kong. In 2017, he was made a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. Recently, the Government of Canada invited him to participate in the expert consultation on private pensions in Canada and the task force for the review of the Employment Equity Act. Dr. Fang.
Thank you so much for the gracious invitation. I would like to also take the opportunity to thank the organizers, especially Association for New Canadians, and also our sponsors for these events. I'm waiting for your marching order. There you go. Yeah. So yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here. More than 20 years ago, I actually was a graduate student at a Memorial University, and I never imagined I would be standing here to deliver a keynote address. So at that time, like many international students, I was struggling actually in the Canadian labor market. And my journey to a doctoral study to the University of Toronto was not really inspirational because I couldn't find a job. Even I secured many job interviews with federal departments with the economic portfolio, like Industry Canada, Human Resource Development Canada, and also Statistics Canada. And and after 2 years of study at U of T, and I finally received my permanent residence. And I tried it again and applied for a job at Statistics Canada, where more than 250 people competed for the job. I was actually lucky to be shortlisted and was brought to the headquarters StatsCan in Ottawa for a job talk. And I was successful. And after that, I worked for the StatsCan for 3 years. Even my PhD supervisor was not really supportive of that move because he said, Tony, you have full scholarship at University of Toronto. You should be actually doing research and writing papers. And it turns out to be one of my best decisions I've ever made in my lifetime. And with the access to hundreds of the StatsCan confidential data set on my desktop, I already, including, of course, legendary census data, I will use a lot today. And I already published a few papers even before I graduated with my PhD at University of Toronto. At that time, I received email from my master's thesis supervisor, Professor Villahan, recently retired in the Department of Economics, and said, Tony, now you have your terminal degree, PhD, you have to think about how to optimize your career path. I did follow his advice. I returned back to academy as a professor, and since then have taught very different institutions, including York University in Toronto, Monash University in Melbourne, Australia, and the Wharton School of Business in Philadelphia, all are urban centers. So when I returned to Memorial in 2015 with the Stephen Jaroslawski chair, many of my folks believe that Tony will be gone in a couple years, given his past records. And to their great surprise, after 9 years of service at Memorial, I'm still here. So the reason I actually stay here in Newfoundland and Labrador is that, of course, we have a lot of the desirable amenities that many newcomers actually value. We have very friendly community. We have a safe community. We have relatively affordable cost of living. Somebody may argue with that lately. And this also because I believe, this province has a lot of potential, right? Giving all its richly reserved natural resources, but also close to the nature, the ocean, and we should have a lot of room to grow given our relative low immigration rate. So, and today I'm going to talk about enhancing and creating diversity in this province, and I believe we need to do this. In a concerted efforts with all the major stakeholders here. I noticed that I'm sitting with the honorary members here, Royal Bank, who is also a sponsor of the events. When I was actually teaching at York University, I was the domain leader for Metropolis, the series. And also I was a member of the Employment Council for Newcomers in Toronto, where all these high-powered, corporate CEOs actually were also members, like IBC, CIBC, and TD, because they fully appreciate the value of immigration. Okay, Of course, we're talking about social, economic, and cultural values, and immigrants contribute to billions of dollars contribution to the GDP, to our economy, and also to the corporate bottom line. So this little bit by sketch of myself. And also, I think I have little experience and authority to speak on this topic because I lived and taught in 3 major immigration countries, including Canada, United States, and Australia. So you can see this is, I also would like to thank the strong support of my research team. Some of the members actually sitting in the audience who are from very diverse social, economic, cultural backgrounds. And I also have the fortune to work with many supported, research partners in our community, including the Workforce Innovation Center of Newfoundland and Labrador, the Productivity Network, IRCC, ACOVA, and also the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, the ANC, of course, Association of New Canadians, Atlantic Regional Council of Settlement Agencies, and so on and so forth. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the changing phase of Canada and also Newfoundland and Labrador, right, based on the data from Statistics Canada, like census. And according to the official definition of diversity, there are many dimensions of the diversity, right, including gender diversity, but also age, ethnic diversity, racial diversity, and disability diversity. And Canada is actually indeed becoming more diverse. And according to our Prime Minister, diversity is our strength indeed. So now looking at gender diversity, women account for more than 50% of Canada's total population. And also, therefore participation of women also increased dramatically from 52.3% to 83.9%. In 2021. And actually, last year's Nobel Prize was given to a notable labor economist at Harvard University, Claudia Goldin, for her contribution to better understanding of women's participation and career progress in the labor market. The share of women in labor force indeed is increased, almost at parity now with men's contribution, at 47.4% in 2023. And many of them are also very entrepreneur, which account for 16.8% of the SME owners. And looking at the share of women within industry, you can also see that women are overrepresented in a number of important sectors, including, not surprisingly, healthcare and social assistance, finance, insurance, education services, accommodation, and food services, and so on. Then on the other side, we also see a dramatic increase of racialized group in Canada. The percentage of the racialized group in the population remains low, according to census data, 3.6%, but they are all represented again in those loadable service sectors, including accommodation for service 12.1%, professional, scientific, or technical services, and financial insurance services. On the other hand, also we see increase in population growth of our indigenous people. We have quite a number of the honorable members in the group today. The Canadian Indigenous population grew by 9.4% from 2016 to 2021, and compared with non-Indigenous population growth of 5.3%. There are also over 1 million people in Canada who belong to the 2SLGBTQI+. And 27% of Canadians aged 15 years and older, or 8 million of them, had at least one type of disability in 2022, and 71% of them actually have 2 or more. So this is a map of people with disabilities across Canada. As I can see, in Newfoundland and Labrador, we have over 30% the residents actually believe to the people with disabilities. So looking at our home, and Newfoundland is also getting more diverse too. So certainly for someone who actually was a student more than 20 years ago and then returned, we can certainly see the dramatic change in our face as well. Women accounted for 51% of the province total population in 2021, and also labor force participation increased dramatically as well, from 31.7% to 56.1%. The share of women in labor force is now about 48%. It's almost at parity again to men's participation. And an even higher percentage of enterprise, 20.3%, were owned by women. And then national average. So we're quite, entrepreneur group of individuals here in the province, as we know. And the indigenous population grow about 9.2% in 2021, which is 0.4% increase from 2016. We know also the indigenous population is younger than the non-indigenous population. We also are one of the most gender diverse provinces in the country as well. So looking at disability, I'll just mention that the number increase, went up 7.3% from 2017 to now about 30.9% of our population. So moving on the immigration and international students, we actually have record-breaking number of international students. You probably noticed that. From 2019, that's about a 55% increase, or 7,240 by end of 2023. And recently, there's a lot of debate in this country about our immigration levels and also number of international students. And I made a strong case a week ago at the National Metropolitan, where more than 1,000 delegates actually attended the conference. And I made a strong case. I'm going to share with you today the major findings of our research national project, that actually we have a strong case for Atlantic Canada and Newfoundland and Labrador to grow our population even further. I'm glad to that regard. Even the federal government recently have reduced the quota for international students by 25%, because whereas other issues, as you notice, housing, including housing conditions, and there's no such cut in the quota for Newfoundland and Labrador. I think that's really exciting news for my university, of course, Memorial University, and also the College in North Atlantic, and because our tireless effort, right, to actually maintain a quota, and also for the immigration levels in this province. Number of work permits issued in 2023 was 6,025. Also in, overwhelming increase of 160% over 2019. I hope that's good news for our corporate sector in the province. Look at our gender diversity. Right? Women now account for 51% of working age population in the province. And according to census data also, the share of women in all industries now 50.1%, 1.7% higher than national level. Okay? So this is a chart shows the age diversity of province, right? Probably not surprising. Along with the small population decline between the census period 2006 to 2022, our labor force size decreased a little bit. On the other hand, you notice that the residents 55 or older, right, their percentage increases over the time period, along with the decline of youth population, 15 to 24, okay, which makes also a strong case that we should actually welcome more newcomers to this province. As I can show later, the age of the population is certainly affected by the immigration rate. Okay, the higher the immigration rate, usually, the younger the population. And to that regard, this province, as you know, has the highest median age in the country, 48 years old. Okay, and we're very pleased, actually, the immigration as percentage of population have increased considerably in our province, a jump of 17.8% from 2016 to 2021. And now the immigration rate stands at 2.8% based on the 2021 census. I think now it's a little bit about 3%. So again, looking at labor force participation or employment, the sheer employment of landed immigrants. Relative to national average 27.2%, we are still relatively low. So that's my point exactly. We still have a lot of room to grow, right? 4.4% is also lower than Atlantic Canada of 8.4%. So on the bright side, the immigrants are very much engaged in the labor market in our province, okay? Labor force participation of immigrants is actually much higher than national average, and also higher than the domestic residents at 57.8%. And immigrant labor force participation stands at 69.9%, almost 70%, okay, which is very encouraging sign. So why diversity? Diversity matters, both in the short term and the long run. In short term, we all understand our skilled immigrants and international students help elevate labor skill shortages, especially after the COVID pandemic. But I think even more important in the long run, immigration and diversity and foster innovation and entrepreneurship. Because newcomers and diverse groups bring in new skill sets, new ideas, new perspectives, which foster innovation and creativity. And also we know immigrants are not a random sample of the population. They are self-selected because their motivation, their drive, and their risk-taking behaviors, which also contribute to their entrepreneurship. We know in Silicon Valley, among other places of innovation centers, the new startup in the high-tech industry actually were funded by, 50% of the companies were funded by newcomers. Why immigrants only account for 14% American population. We have similar kind of evidence from our information highway, like Kitchener, Waterloo, and Toronto area. And I'm glad in that regard also, St. John's, like many other, regional centers, also become innovation hub of companies, like Warify, for example, who actually recruit a lot of recent immigrants. Our evidence also shows that immigration stimulates international trade, right? For the country where we attract a larger number of newcomers. About 1% increase in immigration will contribute to about 0.3% increase international trade. And obviously, members in this room would understand that diversity will enhance multiculturalism and make this province a lot more interesting and exciting place to live and work. And finally, immigration and diversity will enhance the bottom line business, and especially in terms of the employee satisfaction and retention. For some of you who have read the landmark book by Professor Richard Florida, now the director of the Prosperity Institute at University of Toronto, in his famous book called The Creative Class, he actually invented a number of indicators of diversity, including gay index. And for those who actually celebrate, who embrace diversity, right, those kind of diversity indicators not only benefit the member of the minority groups, but also themselves as well. Because those organizations, including RBC, right, who actually value diversity, and actually would provide or foster a culture of inclusion and equity and diversity. So the most recent analysis study done by McKinsey, very well-known consulting company here in 2023, that demonstrated high percentage of diversity, including women's representation in the workforce and ethnic diversity representation, greatly improve the bottom line of the business. And that trend is actually going up, right? The gap between those who are diverse than those who are not actually increased for women's representation from 15% in 2015 to 39% in 2023. Okay, for the ethnic diversity representation, that the gap in the performance also increased from 35% in 2015 to 39% in 2023. We have to conduct our own analysis of the employer's attitude towards hiring immigrants and international students in Atlantic Canada, also in this province. We also tracked the public attitude towards immigration in the region as well. Since I joined Memorial in 2015, the percentage of residents who are supportive of the increased immigration targets has more than doubled, from 20% to 40%. I cannot just attribute it to that increase to our hard work, but certainly based on my involvement in the CBC crosstalk and more recently the Signal, and definitely I have noticed the dramatic change in sentiments, the positive sentiments towards immigration and cultural diversity in this province. And according to our most recent public opinion survey for Atlantic Canada, an overwhelming majority of residents fully recognize the general contribution and also economic, cultural, and life contribution of newcomers to the region, to the province, around 70 to 80%. And also following our recent employer survey, more than 800 organizations across Atlantic Canada. Again, overwhelming majority of employers have positive attitude towards hiring immigrants, international students, about 88%. After COVID, that percent even increased to 89%, probably not surprising. So now I'm going to report our recent findings based on our analysis of census data and also macroeconomic model developed at University of Toronto. This project is funded by the Social Science Community Research Council of Canada and NACOVA, and with the the strong support of our research partner, Association for New Canadians. I really like to acknowledge that. So previous study, only focused on the impact immigration on one particular market in our economy, notably the labor market, and possibly because of lack of data. So there's increasing call for more comprehensive analysis of the immigration on our general economy, including not only labor market, but also financial market and housing markets, because those markets are increasingly interconnected. So that's the reason why we actually conducted this national analysis of economic impact immigration, and also the impact to Atlantic Canada. Our main outcome indicators, including such indicators you probably are very familiar with, like real GDP and the GDP per capita, employment and unemployment, aggregate demand, especially housing, and investment productivity, and finally, government expenditure, taxes, and government balances. I noticed that today is supposed to be a date for the budget, right? I hope that the numbers will come in very soon, okay? And which could potentially show, the impact of immigration on provincial economy and also the commitment of our government to immigration and cultural diversity in this province. And as opposed to actually to go on to the signal, the CBC, program to comment on the budget, but that was postponed to tomorrow. I hope that's no more postponement. And so the idea is that we use some kind of economic modeling here, is that we're doing some kind of counterfactual. The idea is to get more or less causal impact immigration, not just correlation. The idea is that if we say there's a hypothetical increase of additional immigrants to Atlantic Canada, say about 10,000, a national increase about 100,000, right? That's additional increase on the base of our immigration level targets. How that would impact our macroeconomic indicator just mentioned, earlier, okay? And so the model is actually modifying, incorporate additional information related to the immigrants in such areas like labor force participation, just mentioned that, the differences between the immigrants and Canadian-born individuals, the full employment, unemployment rate based on census data, of course, the associated expenditure and the government services, for example, settlement, integration, language training, and job search support, and so on. And also infrastructure. I think this is a big issue here I have, a commentary on, is that I don't think we have issues, so-called population trap, but we do have issue on lack of investment, because as Canada brought in large number of newcomers every year, that's the valuable labor, skilled labor. We need the capital to complement with that availability of labor, right? Therefore, the increased investment in a critical sector like public transportation, like housing, like healthcare. And also we have information about remittances and funds brought by immigrants. And finally, the wage of immigrants relative to Canadian-born workers. So what's the results? So this is a little bit snapshots of major findings. So the real GDP increase will increase by 4.22% by 2032, which is the end of 10-year simulation period. We intentionally avoid the pandemic period. We start simulation from 2023, when the pandemic was over, until 2032, a 10-year simulation period. Of course, population will increase by about 1 million and 100,000, over the periods. For national, it's about 1 million. So real GDP per capita increased slightly. Actually, this is a hypothesis, because real GDP per capita is the more accurate measure of standard living. A national study result was somehow criticized because real GDP per capita was negative because the associated increase in immigration levels. But for Atlantic Canada, as we know, we have more severe labor skill shortages associated, more actually severe demographic deficits and aging population, decline fertility. That's the reason why, right, increase in migration actually increase the real GDP per capita, therefore the standard of living for the region. I think that's very positive results for our analysis. And even we know immigrants are initially below the marginal productivity, and recent cohort slowly assimilating the labor market. This is actually realistic scenario for our examination. Another positive side of our finding is that unemployment, contrary to a lot of misperceptions, immigrants take job away from local workers and would also depress wages. There's no evidence whatsoever. Unemployment is actually not affected, especially because immigrants not only take jobs, but also they create jobs through consumption, but also investment, notably housing. I know that's kind of a topic. This is roughly offset increase in unemployment as they enter labor market and search for employment. Very important, perspective here. The increase in aggregate demand comes mainly from housing, not surprising, to a lesser extent, also come from increased non-residential and machinery equipment investment, including various factors such as overall growth in the economy. Nobody argues about that. The generation of new capital to work with new immigrants. Very important point. We need that complementarity. The positive, hopefully we see something coming from the budget. The positive impact on corporate profits. And I know my friends at Royal Bank would really, care about that, which tend to expand in the ones of our economy. The productivity is also increased. This is also interesting, okay, to some extent, because the investment sector is somewhat more productive than those in the consumer sector. This is probably not surprising. As a professor, we really appreciate the value of our international students in our classroom. For example, our graduate program in economics have 90% of the students are international, okay? And our doctors need new patients. Our property developers need new buyers, homeowners, and so on and so forth. So this is probably where the government will pay attention to, okay? And how immigration will affect the physical balances at the federal provincial levels. Interestingly, government expenditure actually increased in response to immigration, right? Contrary to a lot of misperception that immigrants will all rely on our social security system. And if anything, the conclusion is otherwise. For a number of reasons. For example, first, when immigrants first arrive, when they take the job, they pay tax immediately. Not only receive the benefits, including the pension benefit decades later, right? There's also eligibility requirements to receive employment insurance benefits. On the other side, also because of selection system, and immigrants actually, on average, are healthier than our domestic population. And so they are less likely to utilize our healthcare system. And finally, a lot of immigrants don't have the information to navigate our complex social security system. No wonder they are less likely to apply. So the taxes actually more, that's what I just mentioned, that because the taxes paid immigrants exceed the expenditures, immigrants add to the overall government balance because that hypothetical 10,000 increase immigration in Atlantic Canada, which amounted for about $2.2 billion for the both provincial and federal government, about $1.6 billion to the federal coffer, 0.6% billion to the provincial level by the 10th year of assimilation. This represents a significant reserve against future needs, or could perhaps be redeployed to additional social programs or tax cuts. I hope that is also welcome news from our study. I'm not going to bore you with the numbers, okay? So this is essentially our simulation results. And which is actually more positive to our national simulation, right? Based on the our analysis done earlier from 2012 to 2021. You can see the real GDP per capita was negative at the 10th year simulation period. This is also criticized by many of the immigration watchers and also researchers in the field, okay? In terms of policy implication of our research, additional immigrations likely have a highly positive impact on Atlantic Canadian labor market than an economy than national impact, including net physical balance just mentioned. This generally is consistent with the literature, and by no means there is agreements. The real concern, I believe, which highlights the important role of settlement, sector, that is, there is still, persistent wage gap between immigrants and non-immigrant workers. And recent immigrants have increasing difficult time economic assimilating in the Canadian labor market, and new immigrants are increasingly falling in poverty. So this is exactly why we have done the additional assimilation based on ideal case scenario, because immigrants on average are more educated and more highly skilled. Right? In theory, they should perform at least as well as the Canadian-born workers. the early studies for immigrants who arrived before 1980s do actually terminate, right, by catching up the wages of domestic workers, even surpass the wage of domestic workers. But this is not the case for the recent cohorts. So which highlight the importance of the settlement and integration of recent immigrants to Canada and Atlantic Canada. Improving the economic integration of immigrants adjustment into Atlantic Canadian labor market is likely to be beneficial, not only for immigrants themselves, but also because such integration is likely enhance generally positive effect immigration on the Canadian and the Atlantic Canadian economy. I'm not sure how much time I have. Usually, I would get some signal. So the labor market challenge in Atlantic Canada, I'll just talk a little bit on that, including demographic challenges, aging population, low fertility rate, low immigration rate, and low retention, and associated with the labor skill shortages and COVID, to some extent, make the situation even worse. So this is actually the median age map of Canada. As we can see, we have the older population here in Atlantic Canada, loaded for Newfoundland and Labrador, because our aging population and decline fertility rate. And this is a chart that shows that, for Atlantic Canada, I think Nova Scotia has a lower rate. Nova Scotia has the lowest fertility rate at 1.11, and Newfoundland 1.22. And if you believe in demographics, we need average 2.2 children per household to maintain the population, not even grow the population, right? So this is the profile here. As I said earlier, no immigration, the rate is associated with the median age of the population as well. So Newfoundland Labrador 2.8%. PEI actually has highest in the region, 7.8%. And we also, on the other side, we also have issue of lower retention rate. Within 5 years, based on the census data, merged with the tax data file. The idea is that if you file income tax in 2019 and in 2020 you file income tax from Ontario, that means you probably have moved from Newfoundland and Labrador to Ontario, okay? Which is a reasonable, accurate assumption here for retention measures. So as you can see, Atlantic Canada retention rate is remarkably lower than rest of Canada. And we lost about half of the immigrants within 5 years arrival, although recent data shows there's improvement, which is a positive sign. So today I'm also talking about the role of employer, okay, which is a very important topic for today on the impact of labor market integration of newcomers. In the short term, I think it's very important to highlight the role of employers in economic integration of newcomers, which is number one, determines the retention. Recent immigration policy innovations also give priority to the job offers, including AIP, PMP, Provincial Nominee Program, and Express Entry and Federal Skilled Trades Program. In the long term, I think even more important, is the social cultural integration, right? Including access to social networks, community support, and sense of belonging. From that aspect, I think, as most of us know quite well, Newfoundland and Labrador rank very high, national statistic in terms of sense of belonging and also life happiness. Okay, so I think that's exactly what also newcomers will need to rely on the social network and community support. In terms of hiring difficulties, and employer probably care a lot about that, is that you can see that the percentage of employer who reported labor skill shortages actually increases, okay, from 2019 to 2021. And the most recent data also shows this is the case. And here's the puzzle we would like to resolve here is that, on that one hand, we have persistent high unemployment rate, double digit in this province. At the same time, we have more than half employee reported skill labor shortage and hiring difficulty. Why that's the case? Well, I can tell you the rough answer for that is skill mismatch, okay? Based on our analysis, there are actually two occupations that are more likely to report labor skill shortages. One, it's not surprising, we have this persistent lack of skilled trade workers. And on the other hand, we also need a lot of general labor with no trade certifications. You can see that the top reason behind labor skill shortage in these provinces, based on a survey of 800 employers across Atlantic Canada. Number one, lack of warm bodies. Too few applicants. In 2019 survey, 27% of employer reported so. And followed by 40% in 2021 and 51% in 2022. This is followed by lack of necessary experience and skills. So what are potential issues to solve this labor skill shortage problem? The first, providing timely labor market information to help the matching between the immigrants, international students, and employers. And here, I think the government played a very important role, including State of Canada, and provincial government. Hiring immigrants, international students with right qualifications, changing workplace practices, and including hiring practices. And finally, increase investment in advanced digital technology, including AI, machine learning, big data, and so on and so forth, to reduce hiring costs and also enhance the matching outcomes. So this is a kind of, a snapshots about our survey results, okay? First of all, about 63% employers in our survey received application from newcomers. It's an indication of the engagement of immigrants and internationals in the labor market. And among them, 53% of employers actually hired them. Among those who hired immigrants and international students, overwhelming percentage, 88% employers reported positive experience. Notably because, number one, strong work ethic, hardworking, strong qualifications, and high reliability. Not surprising. Only minority of employees reported some kind of reservations for hiring immigrant and international students. Number one reason, again, probably not surprising, language barriers, 41%, followed by additional training costs, perceived high cost, and obviously, and also lack of familiarity with Canadian business culture and practices, and also retention issue. Right? So this is probably where we need this concerted efforts with business partners, with the settlement agencies, and also our government, right? How to provide more cross-cultural training and communication, and also help them to improve their language proficiency, especially language proficiency related to the workplaces. And you can see that I just mentioned earlier the positive attitude and the willingness to hire immigrants in the next 3 years increased from 79% in 2019 to 89% in 2021. The positive attitudes also increased from 86%, 89% for the reasons we just mentioned before. And here is the a kind of map of findings in terms of employee attitudes towards immigration, international students. The first one is the overwhelming positive, sentiments towards multicultural workforce that would enhance creativity in organizations, especially for those who have hired immigrants. I think the big issue is about exposure. So a lot of time in rural, remote area, we know there's even more severe labor skill shortages, but why some employers are reluctant to hire newcomers? Because lack of exposure. My lifetime in Fogo, I was seeing the foreigners, right? So I'm probably have a little bit of reservation, even sense of feel when dealing with newcomers, international students. That's highlights important cross-cultural communication and training. And we're also talking about, many employers also agree immigrants are hardworking and more productive, and they enhance export opportunities. The overwhelming majority don't believe immigrants take jobs away from locals, which is actually consistent with our macroeconomic results. And they also don't believe immigrants will work for less pay than local workers, which is actually consistent with some kind of substitution arguments. So the next question is, what can we do to enhance and celebrate diversity in our workplaces? And there are three-level initiatives that we believe are important. First is at organizational level. The second is individual level. The third is a societal level. Let's start from the top level, the societal level. As I mentioned, I was on the task force to review and revise the employment equity legislation in this country. In the last 3 years, we have conducted hundreds of consultations around the country with the employers, with the researchers, with the policymakers. Okay, the lessons we have learned. Okay, on the societal level, first of all, is that how to create level playing fields for immigrants and minority workers. We do have various legislation, including our Canadian Human Rights Act, Employment Equity Act, Canadian Multiculturalism Act, and Public Service Employment Act, all with intention now to bridge the gap of employment and also wages and career progression. So the most important issues and concerns reported by our immigrant and minority workers, especially in public service, is lack of career development opportunities. There's some kind of career plateau at a certain stage of their employment. The second part is policy initiative, right, including various different policies, talk about immigration policies, childcare policies. Here we talk about $10 per day childcare, which is a positive sign, but the issue here is that when it is offer low cost, that demand always exceed the cost, the supply, resulting a longer waiting list. So that's the main issue there. And initiative to support LGBTQ2+ communities to promote diversity inclusion. Finally, additional resources that would hope to bring in to this critical area. Finally, the public education and the media, the role of media is also important, including media representation. And here I really applaud for the voice that ANC and many other organizations, sponsors give to the immigrants and minority groups in the province, and which includes we're talking about diverse contents and also stereotype elimination. Okay. So this, if you would like to have more information, we have a few hundred pages of the report on the employment equity act review task force, which just released last December actually. And I also really like to hear your feedback, because this would affect millions of people in this country, especially the women, minority groups, and recent immigrants. And I also would like to highlight the provincial government is actually very committed, right, to equity and diversity, inclusion, and multiculturalism, as according to the website, the provincial government, heavily rely on the multiculturalism on the following international, national, provincial commitments, including we just mentioned Child Rights Freedom, Multiculturalism Act, but also Newfoundland Labrador Human Rights Act and Government Newfoundland Labrador Multicultural Education Policy. Okay, so I think we are making some progress here. On the organizational level, right? So we also need a lot of, we talked a lot earlier about diversity training, but it shouldn't stop there. Okay, I think we need a lot of action after all those kind of training initiatives, including inclusive governance. We need more representation of women and minorities on our corporate board of governors, right? And the decision-making body of the major corporations in this country. We also need to have more equitable, inclusive HR practices to enhance more diverse workforces. An issue we talked about earlier about reaching out, attracting, selecting, retaining applicants from underrepresented group. Equal opportunity for provincial advancement. This is a major issue, based on our hundreds of consultations Sometimes it's not just about getting a job. I know for reporting purposes, sometimes we also have to say, what percentage of the immigrants and the minority workers can get a job, but also the quality of job, right, including wages and benefits and the promotion opportunities. And with diversity training, of course, right, which facilitate productive relationship between members, diversity group. And here is that we need to have the two-way communication. Now, a lot of times, diversity training will provide to newcomers and a minority group, but also I think the similar training should provide to the management, especially higher managers, right, to reduce all kind of stereotyping of potential prejudice and discrimination. Finally, we need a strong commitment from the management. And we also need inclusive organizational culture, right, which includes sense of belonging, access, influence, and fair treatments. And here again, our major highlights from our survey studies about possible ways to provoke employer to hire immigrants, right? That's the first step for the successful economic integrations. Get a foot in the door. As an immigrant like myself, experience a lot of up and downs in the labor market. I certainly fully appreciate and understand, right, how to get a first job, how important it is to get a first job in the Canadian labor market. And our study shows, right, sometimes an additional support from our settlement agency, from the government, would make a big difference. Notably, the paid co-op program, internship programs, the apprenticeship program dramatically increased the employment probabilities and also the retention rate. So those are from the corporate side. Improving language training for immigrant, develop program, enhance cultural understanding, provide more labor market and occupational information services to immigrants, implement a program to bridge skill gaps, and finally enhance credential recognition services. As we bring in large number of skilled immigrants, many of them trained doctors, nurses, which are much needed skilled trade workers in this province. But because the long and time comes, the actually expensive process of credential recognition, right, and make it really hard for them to break in their chosen field of work and studies. We also recently conduct analysis of the diversity management practice in our critical natural resource sectors. Here is what employers, senior managers report to us, right, which are important to help immigrants and minority groups to integrate to that particular sector, including notably mentoring programs, internal immigrant-based networks, streamlined credential recognition again, cultural sensitivity training, collaboration with educational institutions, very systematic, not just kind of ad hoc kind of collaboration is important. Handling hiring practice in a fair, equitable, transparent manner. And also here, our employer recommended accommodation for women in natural resource sector based on interview data. Again, this fairly consistent mentoring program, collaboration with educational institution, family assistance program, probably not surprising, right? As we know, women still take disproportionately more responsibility at home, unpaid. And certainly would have some impact on their labor market outcome, the career progression, as actually, documented by Nobel Prize winner just mentioned earlier, okay? And extensive outreach and sensitivity training on the male workforce. At individual level, right? And we also have our job to do. First of all, how to become more culturally competent and actively engage diversity efforts, including participate in this diversity summit, and communicate and advocate, with your peers, and don't stand by for unfairness, discrimination, and microaggression. This is the same. Sometimes people are just being polite, but actually ignore those kind of workplace problems and issues. As we discuss this critical issue of immigration, it become a hot topic again at both the national and provincial level. And this is probably not so surprising. First time, actually, the gap so close, right? In terms of percentage of the population who are supported for high immigration level and those who are against. So there's a little bit data for sauce, I would say. Again, I make a strong case for Newfoundland and Labrador and Atlantic Canada, simply because we have much lower immigration rate, right, in the province, only 3%, national average 23%, right? And also because we have more severe demographic deficits, right, in terms of the oldest population in the country and the lowest fertility, and among others. Traditionally, our migration, I think it's improving also in recent years as well. Again, so this is my final chart. Hopefully, we'll get some thoughts about how we change our narratives, right, of immigration and cultural diversity in this province. And I thank you very much for your attention, and I welcome any questions and comments. Well, that's a very good question. Although I don't have on my top of my head, I try to memorize all the numbers, as you know. But certainly, based on our review of employment equity legislation, unfortunately, this is a group actually not as representative, okay, compared with the representation in the population in the labor market. So there are still a lot of barriers for employment promotion of people with disabilities. And largely because again, a lot of perception of high cost accommodating people with disabilities. Sometimes it's just not the case, but I guess in this regard, we need a lot of education and training about the realistic costs of accommodation. And we also know that people with disabilities are a lot of time more motivated because it's so hard for them to get the foot in the door, right? They actually put in additional effort to deliver high performing. Well, results also show that, right? Including McKinsey, research recently shows that, the diversity of the workforce contribute to positive bottom line of the business. So yeah, I agree that the people with disabilities still experiencing challenges in getting jobs and also getting promotions. But I think, we need, again, the consultative effort, including ourselves, the academic researchers who present more precise information, right, about hiring, accommodating people with disabilities. And we need to do more, kind of knowledge mobilization and research dissemination, not just sitting in a dark office writing papers, but also do more those kind of, advocation, and also communication with the broader community, including our business community.
Thank you very much. I see we have a question over here. I'm bringing over the microphone.
Just hands up.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Angie. I am interested in the neurodiverse diversity aspect. Have you, I noticed you mentioned physical disabilities. Have you started to collect information on those with neurodivergence? Immigrants who are, who presents as being autistic or anything else under that neurodivergent umbrella. Have you started to collect data in that way so we can make sure that we're totally inclusive as much as possible?
So data on, sorry, can you say it again, on immigrants?
Immigrants who are neurodiverse.
Who are?
Neurodiverse, so autistic.
Also diverse, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's really good question. What are we talking about? Intersectional analysis.
A lot of countries will not accept immigrants who are autistic.
Yes.
And I mean, an autistic can do the work oftentimes just as well or better than a neurotypical. So,
right.
I understand that the cost of hiring an autistic can seem sometimes, but it's, it comes down to what we're really what we're actually looking for. And I don't think we're asking the neurodivergent public about what it is that they can do. And we're making a lot of assumptions about what we think they can do.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we have data here shows that, some, individuals with autism actually perform better in entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
right? And they have quite unique skill sets that should be appreciated by the organizations and employers.
Yeah, we're not just a
so-
bunch of code breakers, right? So,
Right,
yeah.
right. So yeah, I think this is a very important area. It's research. Currently, we don't, we haven't collected data on that very aspect, but certainly if you or other members would be interested in that kind of research, I would definitely open, for collaborations.
I'm
Yeah.
open to collaborating with you.
Yeah, for sure. You see, we have so many, right, research partners for more than 15 research projects underway.
Hello, thanks for your presentation this morning and all of it together. It's great. My name is John McDonald. I am the program specialist for deaf and hard of hearing with NL Schools. I wanted to ask if you're aware. I know one person said that, specifically talking about immigrants who have disabilities. I'm focused on the deaf and hard of hearing group cohort that we have in the province. And from my understanding, deaf and hard of hearing people are often turned down to access to Canada until recently because of hearing loss is relegated as a physical disability. I heard that policies changed and they are allowing deaf and hard of hearing people to move to Canada more often, which is very exciting, and I'm very grateful for it. Unfortunately, not deaf and hard of hearing people are not celebrated all over the world like they are here. There's a culture shock when they come to this community in Canada and in Newfoundland itself. Newfoundland and Labrador is a beautiful place to live. I can confirm that from personal experience. I'm born here and recently moved back. So I think we need to figure out how to support deaf and hard of hearing children and adults and be more collaborative and cooperative and just think of all the intersectionalities of people that come from other countries, including if they're deaf and hard of hearing. So I just think we just need a global support, more research on whether it's women, BIPOC, LGBTQ, deaf and hard of hearing, and have all the intersectionality supported as a whole when they come here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with your comments, and I also welcome you back to the province. Certainly will contribute to population growth, and also of course your professional contribution. Also in addition my teaching economics, also teaching MBA course in social enterprise. Where I invited, a number of different social enterprise and nonprofit organization to my classroom, and my students really appreciate that kind of diversity and exposure to different groups of people and the lived experiences, the challenges in labor market, including the hard of hearing association. So I think agree. There's still a lot of work to do. And, there's increased attention, and even for our consultation for employment equity legislation, we also have interview. I don't know if you've been interviewed. So we try to hear the voices, right, from all minority groups, including people with disabilities. So I think that's where the strengths of this Canada as, immigration country, but also a country with great diversity and inclusion. And it's from my overall journey, for my, academic, work, and also my, my teaching career, I do have strong belief, right? Canada is a very fair and equitable, inclusive place to live and work. And I do believe we have a better future if we work together.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. It was really insightful. Appreciate the numbers. I come from the corporate sector, and we love numbers. We believe that what gets measured gets done, and the concept of diversity is something that we focus a lot on. One of our long-term ambitious goals is to represent the communities that we live and work from a diversity perspective. So understanding the diversity in the communities that we live and that it's changing is really important. We're also working really hard to understand the diversity within our organizations. I work for a company, Fortis. We have companies all over Canada, in the US and in the Caribbean. And in Canada, of course, sometimes it's actually difficult to understand the diversity of your workforce because you actually have to do census data to understand that. We're well into that process and trying to work on that data. And one of the controversial topics that we kind of talk about at the leadership table all the time is whether or not we should, or whether it's ethical. And of course, legislation in the US has brought a lot of spotlight on this year, whether or not it makes sense to set targets to support your diversity work. I'm wondering if you have any perspectives on that and if you'd like to share.
Yeah, well, certainly this is a really important topic we discussed for the review of employment equity legislation. And frequently we'll make a comparison with the so-called formative action in the United States, where they set actual quotas. That's a big difference for Canada. The Employment Equity Act, we don't have that kind of mandatory quotas. We encourage, of course, require employers with more than 100 employees in the federal jurisdiction. This is a big issue here, is that the federal jurisdiction only accounted for cover for about 10% of workforce. So it's still, in terms of scope, still limited, but set against the bar for the rest of the economy, organization to follow the federal, standards, employment equity standards. And so I think, there is increased discussion about how to make the enforcement of the legislation stronger. Okay, there's also call for a setup of the Employment Equity Commissioner, right, to monitor the progress of organizations, especially those organizations with more than 100 employees in the federal jurisdiction, how to comply with the requirement of the laws. And what is more important, I think, in the, just, taking off my head for the EEA task force a minute, is that I think the employment equity, although it's very important because it sets, the floor for employment equity minimum standards. But what is important, like what you have already done in your organization, I would like to congratulate for your great effort on this front, is that to move beyond from the equity requirement to the diversity management, right? So to some extent, how to internalize your policy practices to, make the critical linkage between diversity and organization performance, as the McKinsey study already demonstrated, right? So I think it's that, so how to, make this kind of voluntary effort, including all this program we just talked about earlier, mentoring, diversity training, and, this make sure the minorities, women are represented in our corporate boardrooms, assist, the women with minorities and recent immigrants to overcome the so-called glass ceiling effects, the kind of barrier that are invisible, but we know they are existing, right? And help them to, get into this kind of social network, sometimes corporate networks, which is we know are crucial, and provide all those kind of various kind of support, right? Including, we talked about training, but also other kind of professional support, and for immigrants, but credential recognition, but also the bridge training programs, and for doctors, nurses, engineers, skilled trade workers, make sure they can assimilate to the labor market as quickly as possible. And this, some evidence suggests by Jeff Rice, which is a very well-known scholar in this field at the University of Toronto, who have done this simulation of the lack of recognition of skills of immigrants and other minority groups contribute to the loss of billions of dollars in our GDP. So, of course, also probably to your bottom line as well. So that's what I would really encourage the corporations in Canada and also in Newfoundland and Labrador to how to move beyond the minimum requirements of employment equity legislation and to internalize the policy practices to enhance and embrace this diversity management concepts.
Thank you very much. I see there are a couple more questions, but in the interest of time, please send questions on email and we will follow up with you. Thank you very
Thank you again very much for invitation, participation.